There's any number of people that I could cite right here, and I won't in the interest of time, who have flat out said the classification system is broken, period. And yet it's a system we continue to use. I got caught up in that. You have to remember what happened in my case, and it's happened in too many other cases, is that the government ends up using other means to gain access to either what you know or what you have or what you hold or what you've allegedly exposed or disclosed, and then they decide what level of classification it violated. And then they charge you.
The NSA still has a program to conduct surveillance on people within our borders. Do you see that as a defeat after all that you and other whistleblowers have gone through?
A defeat, interesting enough. I mean, it's a defeat that means that they've won, to say it that way. To say that it's a defeat, I think, would defeat the purpose for which those of us who stood up because we took an oath to support and defend the Constitution. It would do a disservice to who we are as Americans. See, myself and others who did have the courage to stand up in spite of the risks, there was never any need, despite what happened on 9/11, to have ever gone to the dark side. There was never any need at that time to violate in such a vast and egregious manner the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act and turn the United States of America into the equivalent of a foreign nation for the purposes of secret surveillance. Why? Because they would tell me the following: Tom, you don't understand. We live in extraordinary times. We live in exigent, this is the word, exigent conditions. That requires extraordinary means and exigent means by which we will deal with the threat. And if it means we're going to violate the rights of some Americans, hey, they have nothing to worry about if they've done nothing wrong. And it still gives me shivers to this day when the senior attorney in the Office of General Counsel for the National Security Agency said, Tom, the White House has approved the program. It's all legal. You don't want to ask any more questions, Mr. Drake. I knew that we had crossed the Rubicon. I'm telling you, when you have secret power and secret access to that amount of data on individuals, it goes to people's heads. You get to know an awful lot. You also have to remember, for me, this is really personal. I became an expert during the latter years of the Cold War in East Germany, listening in on a fascist surveillance state. The Stasi were the secret police. They became monstrously efficient at getting to know everything there was to know about their own citizens, because all of the citizens were potential threats. So they didn't trust any of them. Any and all activity was suspicious, even if you're not engaged in suspicious activity. And they became monstrously efficient in terms of their record keeping in files. In fact, their motto was to know everything. I can only imagine those who used to be in that state and still live, drooling at the prospect of what they could do with the technology that now exists in the hands of the National Security Agency and other government agencies. Only can imagine to know everything. My life was turned upside down. I know for a fact that everything you could find out or anything you could possibly imagine in your life, any transaction, all your emails, any and all subscriber information with any concern, including telecommunication concerns, was all exposed to the government because they were looking for what was necessary to indict me. And they finally found something, the Espionage Act. So,
what motivates the Obama administration for going to what you say is the dark side?
You know, Lord Acton said that power tends to corrupt. Doesn't mean it will. I was saying this in terms of at the reception. But absolute power clearly corrupts absolutely. If history is any guide, and even though history would say that it's a temporary condition, that freedom ultimately prevails, we've had some very dark chapters in human history, particularly in the 20th century. You know, when you're in those positions of power, up to and including the president, and you're being given secret information, there's a seductiveness that comes with that knowledge because it's secret. What can I do with it? How can I use it? And I'm holding this And then I get to say who I can share it with or not. I get to say who's authorized or has access, the privilege of access. But I'm holding this in secret. And if history is any guide, particularly since World War II and the establishment of the national security apparatus in 1947, the National Security Act, subsequent administrations have been not just reluctant to give up any powers given by a previous administration, they've extended it. They want more. You can never get enough. What does it mean in this country to have the executive branch with what has been a largely compliant and even complicit Congress? You know that my material evidence, my material witness evidence as a whistleblower with 2 9/11 congressional investigations never made the light of day. You know why? There's this thing called redaction within the system where the agency of record that was under investigation gets to review the findings and recommendations. And guess what? Let's just say it was expunged as if that history never existed. It's unfortunate. What does it mean when you have that much power? If we don't check it, if there aren't proper oversights and controls, the executive branch, and under the environment of a post-9/11 threat landscape, there's always going to be more threats. You're always going to manufacture more enemies. And it goes far beyond the original purpose for which it was created. Far beyond. So I said, you know, there is a legal means in this country by which you change law. You go to Congress. You know what they told me? Now this is in October, first week, because I'm asking those hard questions. I realize the Pandora's box is being opened up. I said, you don't understand, Tom. If we go to Congress and ask them for what we really want to do, they're going to say no. They're going to say no? In those weeks after 9/11, Congress would have signed off on just about anything, and did. So why would NSA tell me that we actually can't change the law, and instead we're just going to violate it? And we'll just make it legal later, which is precisely what happened. When it's true, eventually this came out. And they used, it is a violation of our system of justice to use ex post facto law to make legal what was illegal as cover, give the telecommunication companies that were cooperating at an extraordinarily deep level with NSA, provide them immunity, and then expand that in 2008 with the FISA Amendments Act, which just becomes a rubber stamp. Read Section 702. It's the barn door.
What are your thoughts on the Bradley Manning case? What do you think of the information he released, and what do you think of the methods he used to release them?
I'll say it again here. I've said it before. Bradley Manning is a whistleblower. It took extraordinary courage to do what he did. There's all kinds of other mischaracterizations, what I call the characterization of the messenger, because the government has to avoid the message. People have discussed differences of opinion based on amount and how classified or unclassified it was. The fact remains that he's a whistleblower. He was witness to evidence of war crimes. That's a fact. He was witness to evidence of abject corruption in Iraq. He was witness to what I call the dark side of our foreign policy. He was witness to where he was even asked to look the other way, even though he brought it to the attention of superiors. And this is all based on what's already been published. And yet he's being charged not just with the Espionage Act, but with aiding the enemy, which is a capital offense. You have to remember, what's my connection here? During the course of my own criminal proceedings, the chief prosecutor, William Welsh, actually said in the final motions hearing before the judge and with the public, he said that what I did, and I'm paraphrasing, endangered the lives of American soldiers. What I did. So, separate from all the mischaracterizations and what I call misdirection, you have to focus on what was actually released. He had access to far higher levels of classification, including top secret SCI. All that was released, I'll say it that way, was in the very low-level systems. But the aggregate of that provides a very disturbing picture of who we are in terms of our American exceptionalism. And I say that unapologetically, because you think about the extraordinary loss of blood, of American taxpayer treasure, the extraordinary loss of lives and overseas. For what? For what? And he's having to bear an incredibly high price because of a choice he made in his own conscience about what was right, and he wasn't going to remain silent. So here's your choice, and as it turns out, in his own words, which were recently leaked from inside the courtroom, which is actually been more controlled in terms of its draconian restrictions than even what's going on at Guantanamo. It's very clear in his own words why he did what he did. And it turns out he had gone. He actually had made the attempt to connect with U.S. press, U.S. media, mainstream media. And guess what? And so even the prosecution was asked by the judge, Judge Lynn, what if he had gone to the New York Times? The prosecutor said he'd be treated the same way. Meaning it didn't matter. It didn't matter whether he had actually ended up being disclosed. It didn't matter. WikiLeaks disclosure, same thing if it had been disclosed to the New York Times. What does that say in terms of the First Amendment? That's a direct threat. If you burn the sources, you fry the sources, what message are you sending? And so what are you left with? You're going to be left with government mouthpieces and spokespersons saying what's authorized and isn't? And yet you're using this as cover? I mean, the reports that are coming out about Iraq, just one small example. Okay, the umpteen tens and tens of billions of dollars utterly wasted on reconstruction efforts. What was that? Just a sham and a fraud? Apparently it was. Read Peter Van Buren's book, We Meant Well. You'll get the inside story on what he discovered as an eyewitness. This is what's happening in this country. That's not American exceptionalism. It's a total inversion of what we're supposed to be as people. That's not the oath. Those activities, I didn't take an oath to support and defend those. I didn't. Neither did he. And under Article 92 of the Uniform Court of Military Justice, he has a right to question any orders to ensure that it's lawful. And if he's asked to engage in unlawful or he's eyewitness to unlawful or illegal orders, guess what? He doesn't have to follow them. But he made a conscious choice, and he's willing to accept whatever consequences came his way. And it turns out the only mechanism that was available at the time for him, the choice he made, was to go to WikiLeaks. I find it ironic, incredibly ironic, that the disclosures he made were so extraordinary for the time period of those disclosures that other mainstream media had it on their front pages over many, many weeks and months. What does that tell you? I guess it must have been fit for news. There's a lot more I could say about that. I stand with Bradley Manning.